Okay, Coach, thanks for joining me today on this Simple Coach to Coach interview. I realize it's the spring. I think it's getting near graduation. It's not like you have a lot to do, so you taking some time to meet with me is really appreciated.
Sure, my pleasure. Thanks for asking.
Okay. So you came in to Catholic at a perfect time in 2020, and what before you got to Catholic, sort of what's been your soccer journey, and really how did you go from a pretty unique school in Brooklyn, Bronx? Can't remember.
I was right in Manhattan.
Manhattan. Oh yeah, Manhattan proper to DC. So.
Yeah, again, thanks for having me. I am loving my time at Catholic. It definitely was a challenging time to move in to a new school with all that's been going on, but I was thankful. They hired 5 coaches at the same time, so we kind of had our own little crew to kind of navigate together, which has been really helpful. And initially, I grew up not too far from this area, so it was kind of a no-brainer for me to take a look when the job kind of was open. But yeah, you're right. John Jay is very unique. My path kind of started at my alma mater at Fordham University. Kind of learned a bit there and got my head coaching kind of voice at John Jay, which was an amazing experience. I inherited a program that was very young. I only had 7 returning players, and I was hired in July. So I had to get right to it and kind of build that program, which was fun and just really helped me kind of find my coaching voice and my confidence and bring in players that wanted to help build a program. And that had to be part of the conversation from the beginning. Like some students want to go where something's already established and has some tradition, and I had to find the kids who wanted to help me build it. So that was fun. And then coming here, kind of the opposite. There's such a tradition here and storied long women's soccer program, so that was exciting for me to just kind of learn their traditions and keep building and hopefully do it some justice.
What was it like at John? I know we're talking about Catholic, but John Jay intrigues me because for anybody who doesn't know, right? Like, I mean, it's mostly, in its name, it's criminal justice. So anything related to criminal justice, forensic science, like really, like what was that like in terms of having a program and trying to recruit for players for there?
Initially, that was a big concern of mine, trying to identify students who wanted such a specific education. They do have liberal arts programs, but they're definitely, the best there is for criminal justice.
Yep.
Psychology, forensic science that you mentioned, but I quickly learned that there are students out there who are very career focused or driven just right out of high school that know they want to be police officers, they want to try for the FBI, and that was the best place to go. So as soon as I could identify that academic piece, it was a pretty easy sell.
Yeah.
It is a unique institution in that it's primarily commuters.
Yeah.
So recruiting kind of out of state is a different, it's possible, but it was a challenge in that. But New York City is very appealing to many people, as is DC, which having those city schools I'm very familiar with.
Yeah.
And then being that we're a city school, we used city parks as fields. We didn't have a home field. We went to Randall's Island. We carried our equipment. I drove 15 passenger vans. It was kind of just a blue collar get to work mentality, and the students just loved to play. So we had a good time.
I having been to Randall's Island a few times, and just knowing NYU, and it is a totally different experience being in a city like New York City. Athletics is just a very different world, right? Like it's just a different compared to, let's say, Catholic, where you just walk down the street and you're right there. So
yeah, as soon as I took on my interview when I had the tour of the campus and they showed me Carlini Field, I was like, that's it.
I'm in. Yeah. Where do I sign?
Exactly.
By the way, my niece goes to Fordham. She's just finished her freshman year, so special place in my heart, I guess, for Fordham. I guess because my niece, but outside.
Family.
Let me ask you something. Is there? I mean, you were a pretty remarkable ball player in your own right.
Thank you.
Like, do you know? I say the same thing about myself, but I think at the distance between when I played and now, I sort of create this own myth in my head. Do, is there a difference between players now, whether it's skill or technical ability, tactical abilities, knowledge, between now and when you were a ball player?
I think so. There's obviously some similarities and always exceptions, but like I think my generation, or specifically my time in college, we just showed up and did what we were told. We didn't really ask questions, and now the kind of request for feedback, or the desire for the students to be kind of more involved in the process, I guess I would say,
Mm-hmm.
is definitely more deliberate and intentional. And there's not just feedback. They want to know more about opponents. So there's some, I guess, attention to detail there. But in the
Mm-hmm.
same conversation, they don't watch as much soccer. They're not like fans of the game,
Yeah.
uh, in a way that I know. Thankfully, my parents took me to games all the time, or we watch, or
Mm-hmm.
we have a team to follow. So it's interesting that they play a ton, but they don't necessarily
Well, yeah.
watch a ton.
Yeah. I was both. Yeah, that's interesting. I was both. I was like, once I got hooked, forget it. It was, I'd skip funerals for a game if I could. Like I was that.
I
Um,
think, yeah, and there's just the athleticism. I think just continues
mhm.
to, and maybe the technical ability. I think kids are maybe in their backyards more. They have personal
Yeah.
trainers. They're doing one-on-ones. There was always some of that, but I think there's more of that now.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, how tough was COVID for you?
It was pretty brutal. To be honest, I don't think we're kind of over it just yet. I mean, obviously we have more freedoms and
Hmm.
masks and getting out and playing in group sessions, but I think there's still going to be some residual kind of side effects
Yeah.
to that, and specifically student athletes um, discovering more about themselves and what soccer means to them, or
Hmm.
whatever their respective sport is, and kind of what they want from their college experience, and valuing practice or game time. And there was a lot of anxiety that I was
Yeah.
not expecting. I've always kind of joked that I think college coaches have an official degree in psychology, and a lot of what we do is
Yeah.
managing people and trying to help
Yeah.
them. And in these last 2 years, I think a lot of it was beyond my scope, and
Yeah.
I think I've learned a ton. And a lot of this past year or so, it was almost less soccer and more just how do we help the students
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
get through it. So I'm hoping, my expectations from last year in hindsight were just completely unrealistic, because a
Hmm.
lot of what I would normally try to it was the first real season I had, I think, for them to hear kind of my coaching voice or
Hmm.
expectations. We didn't have a non-traditional the year before, so
Hmm.
identifying new leaders and having that senior class kind of step into that role. We skipped all that and just jumped into here we
Jumped
go.
right in. Yeah. Yeah.
um, so so looking back, that was kind of silly on my part,
Hmm.
but still good. And almost coming in during a pandemic, it allowed me to meet the players and get to know them on a personal level without
Hmm.
the stress of trying to make a team or impress
Hmm.
me with soccer. We just obviously had a lot of conversations like
Yeah.
this, a lot of Zoom, um, and even meeting them for the first time in person was just kind of interesting, or without a mask, or so many months of Zoom. The first few months, actually, I was still in New York.
Hmm.
I couldn't even get down here. I was like, by
That's
the way,
right.
I'm kind of
That's
blind,
yeah. Yeah.
like, but so
That's right. You got the job and in the just at the start, right? Like I'm thinking,
yeah. Um,
yeah. And so yeah, you could. Wow, that's true. And New York was just. I mean, that was total lockdown. Well, it's close enough.
yeah,
Um,
it
I
was.
didn't even think of that. You, you're trying. Let me ask you. I asked somebody else this. like how much of what you're trying to do is build a program versus how much is it just take what's there and sort of elevate it, right? Does that make sense? Are you trying to build something from scratch, or you're trying to build a program that is your own, or is there a legacy that you're working with that, there's all these different pieces and you just sort of want to fix around the edges?
Yeah, I think it's a little of both. One of the things that I'm excited, I liked about Catholic was how much history and tradition and that they had, and how to kind of honor that and stay
Mm-hmm.
and bring some of that in, and then tweak it to make it genuine, to me and my personality and what's comfortable for that. So it's been a balance of trying to kind of respect that, and then bring in my own flavor to it, I guess. But one of
Mm-hmm.
the appeals of coming here was the winnability, the
Mm-hmm.
reputation of the school, and like I said, the facilities and the students and just the people here are just amazing. And
Yeah.
um, so I guess, hoping to just enhance it. I think it's a place where people want to come. I
Mm-hmm.
have a large class coming in. I have 14 freshmen coming next year,
Wow.
so we'll be young for
Mm-hmm.
another year. But
Yeah.
it's all exciting.
do, do you have any players that are taking that year they've been given?
I do not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a couple of reasons for that, all which are good and kind of selling points of the university. All of our seniors from 20 and 21, they had jobs before the end of, like,
Wow.
before
Yeah,
the
yeah.
start of the spring semester. So job placement is fantastic.
Yeah.
We have a big nursing program here, so the
Yep.
fifth year doesn't necessarily work well for them because they
Yeah.
graduate and they're ready
And
to
they're
go.
out. Yeah.
And then we do have a graduating senior who's going to Monmouth for her master's because
Mm-hmm.
Catholic didn't have the program she needed.
Yeah.
But so not right now,
Yeah.
but they're all set for
Yeah.
success.
Yeah. 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 No, I'm always curious about that, right? Like, again, if they have a job,
Yeah,
yeah. I know parents are like, wait, another semester of soccer or job? It's pretty clear, right?
yeah.
Um, yeah, let me ask you. I assume you know about the all the rule changes that have been talking back and forth. Um, any thoughts on the substitution rule change in the second half that's been tabled, but I'm just taking an unofficial poll?
Yeah. I think I'm I think I'm kind of in the minority where I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
I've been coaching. I can would it change how I sub potentially? I don't think I normally go more than 6, 7 deep with like the bench I have now, but like
Mm-hmm.
there was definitely times like for instance when I took John Jay to the first round of NCAAs, we played TCNJ.
Mm-hmm.
For 20
Nice
minutes,
draw.
yeah, for 20 minutes we could hang with them. Our players could start to identify movement and get comfortable with their player, and then 6 new players come in, and that's it, with 20
Yeah.
minutes. So I can see how if they weren't allowed to do that, maybe we could have been more effective, but I'm not sure that I think rule changes should have that responsibility to like level the playing field,
Yeah.
make games safer, make games more efficient with how you ref them. But
Mm-hmm.
I think most of this job is recruiting, and
Yeah.
you have to get your players and build your roster, and the teams that would already have a deep roster who can make those changes won't be impacted one way or
Yeah.
another. And
Yeah.
hopefully, I don't think the experience of giving Division III players more opportunity to play in games where that would make that difference
Yeah.
is so significant that it requires a rule change.
Yeah. Um, do you have any thoughts on the whole overtime? Like that's official now. No overtimes in regular season. No golden goal.
Yeah, I actually, when that was being voted on, I kind of was going back to like all my previous seasons to see like what my record would have been if the rule was there. And I think over the last 4 years, Catholic would have been like, their tying would have been 4-4 and 8. So I guess their research is pretty accurate. They would have we would have had a lot of ties regardless.
Yeah.
In terms of like managing playing time for players, I don't really think that's an issue. I mean, you could have a season where you never even go to overtime. So
Yeah.
I think
That's a little bit more random, right? Like you don't necessarily prepare for overtime, right? It's kind of a
But I am interested to see, like now going forward for, like I've been on regional advising committees before, like how much are they going to weigh a tie going forward? Because now that will be more significant.
Oh yeah, that's a good point, right? And especially with strength of schedule and things like that does have downstream impacts and that sort of thing in rankings and NCAA's. I hadn't even thought about that. See, I learned something new every day.
The golden goal rule is, I think is fine. I remember I'm old enough that like at some point that was a rule for club, and I was at the regional semifinals and we went 2-2 into overtime. And by the end of the full overtime, we lost like 6-2. So anything can happen. If anything, it shows which team in that moment has more sustainability.
Yeah. Well, I always say after 90 minutes, physically, I just think the team that has a little bit more juice in they should theoretically do better. And it's not scientific of me, but
Totally.
Let me ask you, how do you like your team to play?
Well,
yeah. I mean, do you like? I mean, like I've talked to coaches who stress the defensive end more. I've talked to coaches who are, I don't care how many goals you score on me, I'm going to score one more than you. Coaches, which are kind of fun to watch at times, but I mean, or some that are just trying to have a balance on the team.
Well, in general, I guess my philosophy, I usually say, is possession with purpose. I like to go forward, but I like the players to take challenges. In the attacking third, I want my forwards to take risks, to take people on. I figure, make a mistake in that part of the field, we have time to recover. In recruiting, I'm always looking for what I consider like the uncoachables. Like, are you aggressive? Are you going up for tackles? Or I tell my players, I don't care if you make a mistake. I'm looking for that. How do you recover? What is your second effort? Because I don't want my team to be a bunch of robots. I want them to go out there and play. So, like, there's some players out there. I think this is also kind of maybe a generational thing. They're like, well, I've made a pass. I didn't lose the ball. I've done my job. But they haven't created
very
it.
True. Yeah.
I'm looking for creative players who want to, who want the ball. Like, if our right fullback has the ball and your left forward, you should still want that ball and do what you can, movement off the ball, yelling for it. Like, some hungry players who just love to play. So that's a long answer to that question. But.
No, that's fine. It is true. And I just watching youth soccer as I have, there is this mindset of players nowadays where it is, and maybe it is like this not overwhelming, but this sense of fear. Like if I do something wrong, somebody's going to yell at me, whether it's the parents on the sideline or it's the coach.
Yeah.
Where I get the ball and you can tell they almost get it in a fearful way. Like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure I want this. And then they get rid of it and they're like, okay, I'm done. Right.
Yeah.
Like I did my thing. That's very, very, very true. Okay, so when you got to Catholic, what was sort of like, what was again, aside from the fact that you couldn't get to Catholic, you were stuck. Was there anything that you brought new to the program, whether that's from your time, what you did at John Jay, or whether you learned it at Fordham, that was new to Catholic?
I moved practice to 6:30 a.m.
That explains it. That explains the pictures, beautiful at Carlini Field, and like posted at 6:45 in the morning. Yeah.
I think a lot of what I brought just because was a change. My position is full time. The coach before me was part time. So
Hmm.
some of the adjustment the players I think had to make was just that I'm here all the time.
Yeah.
I'm checking in on your school. I want to meet with you and have a coffee. Like
Hmm.
we have practice. So I think I was just a little more engaged.
Right.
And as weird as that sounds, it was something that they was new. Um,
Hmm.
and things that I emphasized from the get-go. The three things that we emphasize as a program is family, academics, and soccer.
Hmm.
And if you're at practice and you're stressed about a test, the practice is no good for you in that moment. So the players
Hmm.
know they can just say, "Coach, I gotta go," or "I want to make sure I have breakfast and I'm ready for
Hmm.
my," they have to tutor. So like just establishing those kind of priorities,
Hmm.
um, I think was new.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all right. So I gotta ask, like, why is there a reason for 6:30 a.m. practice, or is that just a preference of yours? I'm genuinely curious because we used to run. We did 3-a-days in preseason, and six a.m. runs were a thing. You did 3 miles. That was 6 a.m. every day.
Um, It's more just when the entire team is available.
Hmm.
So we don't have block scheduling here, so they make
Yeah.
their classes, and then I try to find the wiggle room,
Hmm.
and then work with men's soccer. We share
Hmm.
and then figure the time. So they like it. You get the practice kind of, and then you have the whole day to
And then
yourself.
you're out. You're done. Yeah. Yeah.
I At Fordham we practiced 4 to 6, which was great. I think like I would prefer that. I like to practice when you play your games,
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
your day and when you eat your meals and everything is just more consistent.
Hmm.
Um, and at John Jay, we had to do that time because it was the only time we could get the field
Yeah.
with the priority of the other schools in the area.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's okay. That makes sense because I always thought, yeah, you train when you play, like that, just to sort of keep the consistency. But
Yeah.
that definitely makes sense. Do you have any non-negotiables? Like, are there things that if a player or recruit comes in and you're like, if you want to be part of this program, here are the 5, 10, 50 things that you have to stick to or commit to?
Um, no, I wouldn't phrase it that way. We have kind of team principles and ways that we would like to kind of represent ourselves and represent the team and each other and within the school. As a, but there's nothing that there's no like if you don't run 2 miles in 10 minutes, you're not
Yeah.
going to play type of thing.
Hmm.
My goal is just my biggest fear is that someone graduates and hasn't reached what their potential or
Their
had that
potential. Yeah.
experience. So anything, honestly, the non-negotiable would just be the willingness to get outside your comfort zone and
Hmm.
you know don't be afraid to do something great, like
Hmm.
leave your
Yeah.
mark. So communication is important, and
Hmm.
that's kind of a daily work with the students. But
Yeah.
um, I wouldn't say I have like a list of things like that. But we
Hmm.
just really focus on our team kind of principles: respect, communication, community service. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And if anything, the non-negotiable is just doing well in school. We have a good team GPA.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I think I saw that. Oh, no, I think you made is it, yeah, oh, the
But,
Team Ethics
yeah.
Award. But we'll talk about that. I love that sort of stuff. But um, just I'm curious in the course of a season, how how much do you prepare your team for the team you are playing? Or do you just focus in on this is the way we play and almost the competition be damned, right? Like we're gonna play our way.
Um, it's it's kind of a combo, and I hate to kind of weasel out of the answer like that, but um, best case scenario is to prepare our team to just be confident in how our play, and then our opponent adjusts to us.
Mm.
Um, I would do majority of the scouting and watch the games and then kind of tell the team what I think's important rather than having them maybe sit down and watch that from a game. But if someone is particularly good at set pieces or they have a player who just scored 10 goals, like I'll definitely be mindful of that and incorporate that into like our preparation. But at this stage with the group now, the goal is just to get them feeling completely confident in what our greatest strengths are to go out and then halftime adjustments as needed.
Yeah. That's always tricky. I always say, like, under normal circumstances, if you had the time, yeah, you would devote a session to who you're playing, right? But being that the calendar is so tight, it's just, I got to believe it's somewhat. I haven't talked to anyone yet who said, oh, yeah, we dedicate a whole practice to training against the competition, right? Just because there's no time.
Yeah. I mean, in theory, like the Monday practice is just for us, and then a Tuesday we'll make it more specific to our Wednesday opponent.
Yeah.
And then the same for Friday coming into a Saturday, but it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
In
Thursday's
theory,
like
right? Like
the recovery.
You know what? And you sort of touched upon this a little bit. Coming out of COVID, and then here you're coming into the summer months. Like, what? Did you have any expectations for the season, especially it being your first season, full normal season?
Well, I thought we would win more. As I kind of thought the student athletes would come out like guns a-blazing, like, yay, we can play again. And it wasn't quite that feeling. Like I said, there was some anxiety. There was still joy of coming to practice and playing the game, but kind of priorities shifted about like what student athletes I think were getting from their experience. So my expectation to be able to, maybe push them a little harder or show had to be managed like immediately, and just kind of find smaller moments to appreciate kind of getting the team where we wanted or helping the seniors find their footing. Like without that non-traditional season, it's amazing how important. We just had a really good spring, which I'm excited about, like allowing that level of experience or leadership have their moment and their time to kind of find their voice. I didn't think that would be as big of an impact as it was. So, like I said, my expectations were kind of too lofty, I would say. We had an extremely challenging strength of schedule, which my goal was just to inspire the players that, like, this is where we want to be. This is where you can compete and think about, like, you're playing the game of soccer. You're not playing the name of your opponent. So
very true.
I think we started to lay the foundation, and like I said, we had a really good spring, so I'm excited. We ended with a win, so our momentum going hopefully can carry through to August.
Was there a point during the season where, or was that during preseason where you realized that level of anxiety was still there and it was, I don't want to say getting in the way, I'm not making it like an obstacle, but almost like something like, I have to deal with this before I could deal with my lofty goals? Is there a point that you realize, or was this just sort of throughout the season you were like, okay, I'm constantly trying to adjust?
Honestly, I wish I did notice it in preseason. Preseason was fantastic. I have a wonderful team. They work really hard. They're very close. They really looked out for each other, which I appreciate on so many levels. We had a bigger roster, and having them all kind of look out for each other is great. I didn't really recognize, I think, the level of anxiety until like mid to late September.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which in a regular season, that's when things start to get a little more challenging. You get a little tired. You kind of need your second win to go into October. And so I think on top, this just kind of like presented itself on top of all that in a stronger way, to kind of, and it's unfortunate timing in general because it's right before conference play and stuff, but it
Yeah,
was,
that stuff, that I hate to say it, right? Like that stuff just pops up when it pops up, right? Like
yeah,
there's no secret sauce or formula for, hey, I know this is what's going to happen. Like there's no, it
like,
just,
yeah. I mean, we try to be proactive in identifying, like being a fall semester sport is amazing because of the weather and you're coming
right.
in and you're new. But experiencing midterms like right during the peak of your season and
Yeah.
um, you know, a challenge that obviously spring semester has too, but we try to kind of talk it out and get ahead of it, but sometimes it still kind of comes up and hits you.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, y- was there when you were looking at the team, aside from that, did you think there were was it a big puzzle piece you were trying to piece together? Did you have all the pieces you thought, or were there parts where you're like, well, I'm not too sure, or whether we could hold ourselves defensively, or whether we could score goals?
Um, there was a couple pieces, I guess, positionally that had to change more than I would have liked, and we had unfortunate. Um, we had 3 concussions last year,
Oh
and
my gosh,
yeah, so we
3!
couldn't
Wow,
three,
that's
and we were, I don't want to make excuses. We have work to do. I have work to do, but we have great players. But with the injuries and we could never. I couldn't get a consistent lineup game to game
yeah,
for maybe 8 games in a row. So there was
yeah,
a lot of change where if you're like, okay, this is my center back and these are my defenders for the next 4, I didn't have that luxury,
mm,
unfortunately. So some momentum we had early on got kind of immediately squashed just by having to
yeah,
make those kinds of adjustments. I think the thing that we lacked the most was experience.
mm,
We have a very talented team, but we had 9 freshmen and 10 sophomores. In my opinion, that's 19 freshmen because the
mm.
sophomores, didn't have a
Yeah,
season.
yeah.
Um, we had 3 juniors and 5 seniors. So
Wow, that's young.
having an experience of going through like a full official fall season, like basically no one had that. So
Hmm.
um, looking up to so making that easier for the new people. Everything was just new for everyone. So there
Yeah,
was no one to not no one. There was just less people who had kind of gone through that
yeah,
to kind of share that experience and how to recover and how much sleep you need. Like a lot of that. I think it helps. Obviously, we have coaches and I have a great staff, but when it comes from your peers and when they're back in the dorms and they can have those conversations, I'm looking forward to going forward next year.
yeah,
We have a lot of experience even with the younger group.
yeah. Well, yeah, you got two classes that you know earn their stripes in a full season, right? The good and the bad. So
Yeah,
that's its weight in gold, right? As far as I'm concerned.
yeah.
Um,
And the best takeaway, like I said, we were 6-10-1. We had some great wins, some close games, but like some of the games we lost, um, the feeling at the end of the game, this helped me identify leaders going forward or who kind of had the mindset that I'm looking for. They were obviously angry, but they were disappointed because they felt like we could have done better or we were right there
yeah,
or like
yeah,
so it wasn't like you asked how I like my team to play. I liked to play hard. Sometimes the other team's going to win, but what the other team thinks of you when the game's over, like
yeah,
oh they came after us and I'm going to have to think about them next year,
yeah,
type
yeah,
of thing. So I appreciated, I'm a pretty bad sore loser, so I'm not the best person to ask, but the kids that, showed that kind of emotion after the game, that's what I liked to see. That
yeah,
was my takeaway from, like we don't want to feel like that again,
yeah,
like a missed opportunity.
yeah.
Is the
That's very true. Like you don't e- even as a player, I always at some point it was always about me walking off that field feeling like I did everything I could, regardless of the result. And if I didn't, I came off the field and it was 10 times worse
Yeah,
because I just felt like I could have done more, I should have done more. I just for whatever reason I didn't.
and
And that
it's
matters, right? Like ultimately that matters like you said, going forward and how you play that team and how that team plays you. Right. And that's how you build a reputation.
Yeah, I think we're a team that's still trying to find our identity, and I think we did a lot of work on that in our non-traditional season, and I'm excited, about the future and this coming fall, because I think we have those pieces in line now. We'll have more of a little chip on our shoulder coming into this season about what we're capable of doing. So I'm excited.
So I have to ask, why the imbalance of the class, imbalance of the classes? Like, because the
It's not my goal.
four seniors and three juniors. Yeah. I'm like 10, 10, and 10, right? Like, give or take, obviously, but that's sort of in my head. And then I'm just curious, was there a reason for it, or?
Well, I've only recruited 2 classes, so
You're right.
the class that I have, the class of 5 that just graduated started, I think, as 8, and the class of 3 is, I don't know, that was just a small class. In theory, I'd love to get like 8 each year. We had what I thought a lot of kind of missing spots to the team, and I wanted to bring in the best possible players and people that can, help take us back to the landmark championships and get us to where we want to go. I'm hoping I can, level it back out soon. So it's not.
Yeah, no. It's just I don't see that type of, like I said, that type of imbalance, and I get you only recruited two of the classes, but that's striking, right? Like where it goes, it's such a young team that you don't have that senior leadership, which I think ultimately, in a lot of the teams in this year that were really successful were because not only did they have the seniors, they had the super senior folks who came back, right? And doubled down in that type of leadership, I think.
I think we saw that a lot this past year, actually.
In the teams you played?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Or just, and I think it'll still be a couple more years, like you asked if any of the kids are staying. The players who are transferring, even from D1 to D3 to fill those spots or taking their 5th year. I think, it was great. There was some teams that really showed up last year that maybe we hadn't seen at that level, but I'm excited just, obviously that our region was so strong this year. If we can play, McDaniel had a great run, and Scranton and Hopkins, Virginia Wesleyan, Christopher Newport. Like, it's exciting that even just right here, I can schedule games. I don't have to go far and, put ourselves hopefully on that map sooner than later.
Yeah. Well, I'd say too, right? Like, if you want to be the best, you sort of got to play the best. You can't hide. You can't in soccer. You can't hide as a player. You can't hide as a team, because if you do, you're still not going to get anywhere, right?
No, it helps with recruiting too. Like, the best players want to play the best team, so if they go online and see our schedule and they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I spoke to. We talked about the same thing. I spoke to Colleen Pivorato at Scranton.
Yeah.
We were saying the same thing. Like, you regionally, it's a great place to be just because there's so many quality teams that you can go up against, and that's what you want to do. You don't want to not be up against the best competition. And to have a great reputation, right? That's the hard part. So I do want. I mentioned it earlier, the Team Ethics Award. Could you just talk about that? Because I never saw the Team Ethics Award. I didn't know it was a thing, but I thought it was really, again, in knowing the mission of Catholic and whatnot, I just thought it was really cool, and I wanted to bring it in.
I think ultimately the award goes to teams that basically have the least amount of cautions from refs. So we had 7 yellow cards in 20 games. But I think hopefully it just speaks to.
We got to change that, by the way, if you want them tougher.
Well, I like to think, I tell my team we want to be aggressive, but not dirty. There's moments where you have a tactical foul, but it's a huge pet peeve of mine to give up the ball in that attacking third if their defender's facing their own goal and you're just trying to get at it. That's a loss of possession and drives me nuts. But I think one thing our senior class did very well was represent our team with such class and sportsmanship. And this was a weird year with like no handshakes and things like that. And sometimes there was confusion about like how to handle that with different programs, but they would always, line up and wave. I think if whenever we visited another school, they would be able to say that we were good guests and worked, did our part. So I'm pretty proud of the award, but yeah, we want to play hard, and a couple yellow cards is okay, but no red cards.
Yeah. You got to earn those. You got to make sure they're worthwhile.
Yeah.
I guess what you're two-ish years in, like what has surprised you the most, whether it's of your team or the program, the university?
What surprised me, like just being here, one of the things that stands out even from the interview process was, like I mentioned earlier, the people here, besides the student athletes, the staff, and their willingness to kind of share their struggles or positive experiences to like help me or someone else like run their program if something like kind of worked well, especially because we were navigating such tricky territory these last 2 years, and then of course being new, their willingness to sit down, have coffee, have meetings to group, and like they want to have a good department. Everyone's not just solely focused on like their team. So I've been familiar with departments before where it's kind of like everyone's out for themselves, and it's a profession where you need to win games to kind of keep your job, which gets a little tricky now with kind of the goals of creating sometimes I don't think the coaches get the credit they deserve for trying to create that experience and identify mental health, but knowing that kind of the parameters of this profession, and specifically, Division I football or basketball, like you still have to win games.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's another video.
That's okay. I'm glad. I love that stuff.
So, like, during my interview, I had lunch with, like, 10 other coaches, and during the process, like, the football coach, shout out Coach Scott, he like, knew the names of some of the women's soccer players, and I just thought, wow, how great of a program is it where, like, they're so invested in everyone that's going on, and the fact that they know, like, a player that's not on their team, or, like, that they contribute, or they're around, or they work in it. So, like, it really is a great community here, so I continue to be like surprised and happy to come to work because of that community.
Yeah.
Right. And it obviously is something that works right now. All our spring sports are completely dominating, which is fun.
That's true, right? They're doing well. They're doing baseball, softball, track and field,
lacrosse, men's and women, just won the conference. So so it's good stuff over here. It's exciting to be in an environment where people want to, be successful, but share that love. Yeah. With the team, like I said, I think my expectations going in were a little different. I had to realize it's a marathon, not a sprint, for getting my voice or my thoughts or my feelings of where the team should go. Some of that had to be tabled a little bit, and I think I was excited to just like get it all in. And with the change of pandemic and a change of a coaching staff, and some things I had to hold on to a little longer, just because I think it was comfortable for the players, because they couldn't incorporate so much change so quickly. So it's great takeaways. It's good learning. Learning that I need to change too, and how I approach some things. This is an area where you never stop learning.
Yeah. That's for sure. And if you do, it's time to, stop, because you're missing something.
Yeah.
A couple of questions that have sort of popped into my head. And I should have asked this earlier, but was there a rationale for, aside from it's the proper thing to do if you're trying to run a program, that went from a part-time coach to a head-time coach? was there something about the department that, whether it's the athletic director or the school, said, look, we want to commit ourselves to athletics and to raise the profile of the school or anything like that? Or was it just like, well, we should have a full-time coach?
I'm not. That was obviously before I got here. I'm not privy
Yeah.
to all those conversations, but the president, who's about to retire, is very
Yeah.
supportive of athletics. So he brought in a golf program for men's and women's
Uh-huh.
golf, and they've been going through each team, like moving positions from part time
Yeah.
to head time. So there's
Oh, okay.
still a few more programs that need to
Uh-huh.
change over, but I think in general they see the value our department brings to the entire university. I think we
Right.
make up 33% of the student body or student
Yeah.
athletes. So giving the support that we think is the adequate, necessary support
Yeah.
is just moving in a positive direction.
Yeah. And then the other thing is just an observation about, you know, um, about, I don't want to say monitoring, but sort of your first line responder slash psychologist, psychiatrist in helping these young players sort of navigate through the challenges of life. I spoke to someone who actually said, like, I was doing things that weren't part of my job description because that's what it was called for. And I think the mental health part is certainly, and, the tragic stories you're hearing now is, right, that's what everybody has to try to prevent. And so that alone is value enough, right? So anyhow.
Yeah, like I said, I think these last 2 years have almost been more about that,
Yeah.
checking in on the students than even the soccer component.
Yeah.
And it's both rewarding and frightening. And at the same time, some absolutely amazing conversations. In some ways, it encourages students. Like the best part of the day is if a student just comes, sits down, and starts talking.
Yeah.
But I found that initially, I even have to schedule it for them. Like, okay, you have to come check in.
Yeah.
Rather, obviously, the door's always open, but to be more intentional about it
Yeah.
is definitely something that I took away from this past year.
Yeah.
But it's
Because left to their own devices, they'll just be like, they'll bury it somewhere, right? And that's not what you want. No.
yeah.
Okay, we shift to recruiting, even though we sort of rambled on 50 different topics, which was
Sure.
great. This is unofficial, another sort of poll that I've started doing courtesy of someone on the D3soccer.com boards. Do you use those? You've seen the companies that go out and they help players either find schools or get coaches interested in them. Do you use those at all, like those types of services, or you do your own recruiting, that makes sense?
Yeah, I'm pretty old school. I think I like to kind of do it myself. But what I will say is, I get emails constantly from. I do like the platforms like. I get a lot of recommendations through field level from players who, and maybe it's a player I'm already in contact with, but then it's an easy platform to have a conversation with like their coach or something. But like NCSA and College Fit Finder, I think it's a good place to have all your information together. So I can just kind of pull it up and see if there's new content or film or like. But for me to just get like that generic correspondence or like this player is that I don't really go for. Or even if let's say someone hires a company to help find schools for them, I would still like that contact to come from the student. I think it's important for them to take kind of ownership of that recruiting process. Maybe someone helps you identify a school that meets your academic needs and location and money, but then how can you get more involved in it? Because
they got to own it, right? Like, the players got to own it, whether they pay somebody or not, right?
And I'm, in theory, you'll be with that person for 4 years. You know them for 5 or 6, depending on when you start recruiting. So it's important to get to know. I always want to make sure I'm bringing in the right people I'm taking this conversation a little further, but like, I'm not just searching through those kind of sites to answer your question.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's fine. I'm genuinely curious about it. Get those emails countless times a day, and I don't know enough about them so I just figured I'd go to the people who actually probably do. So, okay, the other question, this is being recorded, mind you, is what are your thoughts on showcase tournaments?
I love them.
Okay.
It's well, and depending on, I'll be strategic about where I go to get the most bang for my buck.
Hmm.
Budget is definitely a factor, specifically recently with cuts to
Yeah.
programs and stuff. So sometimes I'll keep an eye out to see what teams are. I'll go where, like I said, I can see the most amount of players, and I am looking to always bring in the best players, and I have some students next year from further away, but for Catholic, from Boston to like Southern Virginia is kind of our bread and butter. Most of our teams from
Hmm.
New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and
Hmm.
we're fortunate to have a ton of showcases on the East Coast,
Yeah.
even Florida. So I don't necessarily have to go out to California or Vegas or
Hmm.
Arizona for some of those showcases. But if I'm really trying to track down and show some love to a particular player, then I'll do what I can.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you when you go to them, are you don't go to them just to sort of, hey, I'm going to show up at a field and watch a game. Are you intentional about it? Like, here are 20 players that I want to watch.
Yeah, I'll be very intentional about it. Have my schedule. And if there's ever, I'll also just add teams that I like maybe have a relationship with or know that there's some quality players out of
Hmm.
that area, or if I've recruited from them in the past, if that fills a hole where there's a space where I don't have a game or something
Yeah, yeah.
to go to. But it's definitely all laid out in advance. So
Hmm.
um,
How big of a deal are your ID camps? Do you prefer your ID camps to the tournaments? Like, or are they serve two different purposes?
yeah, for me it's two different purposes. Um, so hopefully the ID clinic for me is kind of something that helps solidify the relationship for the player almost more so
Mm.
than for me. So of my 14 freshmen, 9 of them came to like one of my ID clinics
Yeah.
because I like the first thing I say when students show up to an ID clinic, student athletes, is this is much of an opportunity for our staff to evaluate you as it is for you to evaluate us and
Hmm.
get a sense of the campus. And maybe after 3 hours of coaching, they don't like to hear my voice anymore. Like they need to figure out like if it's where they want to be and if they
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
comfortable and if they like the field and like so it's I think students who choose ID clinics should go to maybe the 3 or 5 of their final choices. I don't think you should just go all over the place.
Hmm.
Which is where like actually with CUNY sometimes we did shared
Yeah.
ID camps, but a lot of times we were recruiting the same kids, so it was actually a good bang for their buck to kind of go to those events. But
Yeah.
hopefully, a campus tour, and that's kind of. But I'll definitely look for players, maybe a little younger at the tournaments, at the showcases, and coming to
To
an
try
ID
to
clinic.
roll them into that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense.
I think coming to an ID clinic also shows that respective coach that they are seriously considering your school.
Hmm.
And at least that's the goal I have for my ID clinics.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, that's a commitment, right? Like they pay if they pay, that's a commitment, right? Like, and they come and they show up and they do the thing. That just shows a level of commitment beyond just shooting you a random email or two, right?
Yeah, I have attended some of those other clinics, kind of clinics, I guess, run by organizations that are more
Hmm.
like regional based, and
Yep.
um, that that was fine. That was a good recruiting opportunity.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's not unique to Catholic. It's just
Yeah. 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 Those are you see those around like. There's a bunch in Pennsylvania, like particular schools, like high academic achieving schools that band together to get the right players in.
yeah, yeah.
This might be a little bit different for you because on the girls' side, I think it is different. But what are your thoughts about high school soccer? Not
Um,
that you probably get a chance to go watch a lot of it, but do you think it's a decent environment for a player?
I think the benefit of high school soccer is really just the social
Hmm.
aspect to it and how it can maybe just enhance your high school experience. If I'm going to a high school game, it's because I really love that player and want to like get more face time and put in that
Right.
extra something. Um, and obviously good to have touches on the ball, but if you're playing soccer, hopefully you're standing out, you're getting
Yeah.
recognized. But like I think to deprive someone of that, which can really just enhance your 4 years of high school, I think that sucks. But it's not like where I'm going to recruit.
True. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I mean, and there are some great teams, and I get that. And New Jersey's full of
Yeah.
like really good high school teams, but
Yeah.
um,
No. Yeah. I just again, it's one of those things where I, I guess I fall on the side of the. It's just an experience that they're not going to be able to mimic elsewhere. Their clubs, they're not going to get the same sort of again that whole experience. The fans, their friends, all that kind of stuff, right? Like
yeah.
I just think it's a different experience for them. Okay, last question, and then you can get on with all the work that you have to do to whatever you do during the day, which maybe another
Yeah,
email.
we do have graduation this week. Tomorrow's our banquet, our athletic banquet.
Oh, nice,
So it's good times over here.
nice. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. All right. Um, is there something it, players that you recruit? They're potential good college ball players, but there's a gap between what they are as players in high school versus what they are in college. What is that gap? Is it physical? Is it just the mental aspect of the game? Is it their tactical awareness?
I always say I think the two biggest changes heading into college are again the physicality and the speed of play.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in some players adjust quicker than others, and hopefully that's why I say I like to identify those who are willing to get into a tackle and get up for those 50-50s. In recent years, I think I've seen like a players with lesser ability to kind of to take the ball down out of the air and
Yeah.
playing that kind of game. But yeah, just speed of play, and hopefully that will just come like we come bring that confidence.
Yeah.
And specifically with my teams, I say I don't care if you're a freshman or a senior, the most effective player will play. So
Yeah.
hopefully we can give you guidance and confidence as a staff, but coming in with that self belief and willingness to play and get into it, I think is kind of that game changer. Can you be self motivated?
Yeah.
Uh, can you get after it for that?
Yeah.
But
There is a point where you can't. I don't want to say it's not a blanket thing, but there's almost like a complacency in the club game once you get to a certain level or on a certain team and you're playing. There isn't that drive as much as once you get into college. It is your level of competition jumps. All of these factors in the game jump, and can you meet that? Can you jump as high? And
so I
that's
think I'm sure I know you've been like every coach probably says the same thing, but like I continue to recruit players who come in and maybe are frustrated that they just were the best player on their team and now
yeah,
they're on a team where everyone was the best. So trying
yeah,
to find how they stand out or what makes
yeah,
them unique or what they bring to the table. And that is kind of an emotional, mental challenge that
yeah,
I think players go through, and hopefully as a staff we can help, identify for them. And I always
yeah,
tell them like you have to come in and be the best version of yourself because,
yeah,
Susie's not Katie and it's not Molly, like everyone's in theory being recruited because of that special gift that they have, but
yeah.
there is this overwhelming sense of what happened. I used to be the best player.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like
Um,
something's wrong with my game now that
yeah,
wasn't wrong 6 months ago, right?
yeah. So that's a constant shift in conversation.
Hmm. Okay, Coach. Thank you. This was awesome. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah. So nice to meet you.
Yeah, pleasure. Hopefully, we'll do this again before the fall. Maybe I'll reach out and we'll get some time and can gear up for the fall, which I'm already excited about because there's not a lot of soccer that I watch now. So.
Well, yeah, I'm a Liverpool fan, so I've got some big games coming up.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! Wait, all right, this interview's ended. It's over. As you can see, I'm not in the happiest of campers these days.
I don't know if you can. I got my little.
Oh my gosh! I see it right there. I'm gonna blur it out. It's gonna be. I'm gonna edit this thing. I'm just gonna blur it out. All right, Coach. Thank you very much. Do appreciate it, and best of luck with everything.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.